it, everyone. I'm the real John, and 2022 was quite a year. I had stopped doing movie reviews in March to focus on being a full-time 5 days a week streamer. I celebrated a year of being a VTuber with a new redesign, and I dropped my pseudonym in place for my real name, and then I started burning myself out from the streamer grind, and I returned to reviewing movies in September, doing my, hopefully, last rebrand as a VTuber. On top of all that, 2022 was one of the best years for movies in all of my time of reviewing, which has been about the last decade. There were so many good movies out this year that I didn't want to limit myself to just 10. We've got 20 of these suckers this year. So, let's stop wasting time. These are... The Deer and Projector Lights Top 20 Movies of 2022. Number 20. Disney Animation has been in an interesting period leading up to its 100th anniversary. Following a couple of fairly mediocre sequels, we got some earnest but messy stories dealing with generational trauma. And while Encanto managed to garner a lot of love once it hit Disney+, I'm not sure Strange World will garner that same amount of a following. That said, I really appreciated the movie. I dug the more cartoony character design, I liked that it features an interracial couple with a gay son, and it's just treated as normal. I liked how it shows how even when you say you won't end up like your parents and you'll be better than them, that you can still end up being just like your parents. I liked the attempt at an environmental message that they were going for, and that sometimes you don't need a villain to defeat in order to win the game, so to speak. I also just loved the gorgeous world design. It reminded me a lot of that TV special Alien Planet that used to air on Discovery back when, Discovery aired good programs. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it was better than Encanto, which just got better with every rewatch for me, but I'd say it's at least on par with or better than Raya in its execution. And now that it's on Disney Plus, you can see it for yourself since Disney decided it was better to dump it there after a month in theaters rather than actually advertise for it. Number 19. 2022 was also just a good year for horror. In previous years, a lot of my bottom 10 list would feature a bunch of bad horror movies, but this year was so good for horror, there's 4 of them on this list. First up, you got Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill making good movies together, still after all these years. Since they first teamed up with Sinister back in 2012, this duo hasn't made a single bad movie. Not that Sinister 2 or Doctor Strange were amazing, but they were still decent or at least just not bad movies. This one, however, I'd put it a solid second behind Sinister for their best work. Taken from a Joe Hill short story, we have a really twisted story of a boy trying to escape from a kidnapping, where the kidnapper has this fantastic mask design that has 2 parts so he can show either the top or the bottom half of his face if he wants to, but never the whole thing. Plus, Ethan Hawke is unrecognizable in this role, completely sinking into the demented mind of a killer playing with his victim. I will say the reason it's not higher on the list, or over Sinister, is that there are some clunky bits, wooden dialogue at certain points, but honestly, that kind of fits for the retro vibe they were going for. This is set in 1978, and this movie feels like the kind of old-school horror you'd find on VHS back in the day. It's a great throwback and a really unsettling story. But then, what else would you expect from its pedigree? Number 18. DreamWorks had one of their best years in a long time. Both their movies this year were fantastic and ended up on this list. First up is this adaptation of the kids' book series, The Bad Guys. This is fairly recent, so I have no idea how well it does at adapting that book series, but the movie itself is good. It's got a great visual style and good kinetic energy. Its humor is on point and rarely misses. The story is solid as both a heist movie and a character study on these criminals who aren't really bad per se, but because they're animals that are often feared, a wolf, a snake, a shark, a spider, and a piranha, they've been treated as bad, so they just leaned into the part. The story does kind of falter in the third act, but the humor, visuals, and voice acting especially carry the rest of the way through. Even if this was their only movie this year, DreamWorks would have had a good year, but they had to go and one-up themselves. Number 17. Speaking of DreamWorks one-upping themselves, how is it that the 6th entry in the Shrek franchise is the best one? When does that ever happen with a series? And yes, I'm sticking by that claim. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is better than Shrek 2, the de facto best Shrek movie. That's not to disparage Shrek 2 by any means, but The Last Wish just shot right past it like a cannonball in my mind. For one thing, the animation is just stunning, taking on this visual style that makes the movie feel almost like a moving painting. It's the best looking the Shrek series has ever been. Then there's the story, which has Puss finally realize his daredevil carefree lifestyle might finally kill him as he's down to his final life, initially giving up adventures until he learns about the wishing star and the one last shot at getting his 9 lives back and therefore his courage back. Or at least so he thinks. The side characters are great too, with the returning kitty Softpaws, Goldilocks and the Three Bears as this Cockney crime family, and this happy little chihuahua with no name and an absolutely heart-crushing backstory who becomes Puss's reluctant sidekick by the end of the movie. The only character who didn't quite work was John Mulaney as Jack Horner, mainly because Mulaney can't actually voice act, it's just him reading the lines. It's the same problem I had with him as Chip in the Rescue Rangers movie. But Horner is such an unrepentantly evil character that Mulaney's performance isn't too distracting. Oh, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Wolf Daddy. I won't go into too much detail given his twist, although you can probably figure it out for yourself. But between his design, the animation, and Wagner Moura's performance, this wolf has quickly become one of DreamWorks' best characters. I'm not sure how high into the full DreamWorks ranking this would fit, but it's definitely the best thing to come out of Shrek. Which means, if they are still planning a Shrek 5, then it has some big boots to fill. Number 16. I know, Turning Red is only number 16 on this list. This year was so packed with hits that this only made it up to number 16 for me. That's how good last year was. I almost feel like I don't need to add anything to this movie. The movie is beautifully animated, it tackles issues that girls face as they head into puberty directly and honestly. It's another really solid story about generational trauma. Man, Disney's just having that theme a lot lately, aren't they? And it's got killer boy band songs written by Billie Eilish and Phineas. What's not to love? Number 15. Look, sometimes you just need a fun ride, like a roller coaster. And what better set piece for that roller coaster ride than a bullet train, the public transit roller coaster. I'm guessing this is only very loosely based on the book by Kotaro Isaka, but even so, this was such a blast of a movie. David Leitch continues just dropping bangers, and this was in the top 10 for a few months before the list just started filling up. It's got Leitch's great mix of physical comedy and excellent fight choreography. The characters are all interesting and fun to follow. The mystery has some wild twists and turns, and the whole thing amps up to this explosive conclusion. It's exactly the kind of movie that I can turn on, strap in, and enjoy the ride. Number 14. I'll admit, while you can start feeling the almost 3-hour runtime and we're still doing the Frank Miller grim dark version of Batman, I enjoyed this way more than the last several live-action Batman movies. Much as fans were grumbling about Pattinson donning the cape and cowl, if you've been paying attention to his latest movies, you'd know Pattinson can easily handle a character like Bruce Wayne. And he does, as he's given a completely emotionally withdrawn and bitter version of the character who finally begins to realize being angry and punching all the time isn't what makes a hero. It's honestly my favorite iteration of Bruce in live action to date. The supporting cast is also fantastic, with an unrecognizable Colin Farrell as the Penguin, Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, and a demented Paul Dano as this Redditor chode version of Riddler, who is justifiably angry, but uses that anger to lash out at everyone and not actually solve the problem. A loser who prides himself on being the smartest guy in the room. Hell, it took me a bit to realize just what the climax of the movie was even referring to, and I applaud Reeves for going there. Also, remember when Batman was called the world's greatest detective? Well, here he actually solves a mystery for a change. For the actual length of the movie this time. I don't think we've ever had that before in live action. No idea how this iteration of Batman will fit in with Gunn's plans over at DC, if it will at all. But even if we don't get any more of Reeves' Batman, what we got was pretty damn good. Number 13. From the Batman to the Northman. Let's go on a trip, shall we? Following his story of madness and isolation with the Lighthouse, Robert Eggers takes us back to the 9th century Scandinavia with the story behind the iconic Shakespeare play Hamlet. And it's a bloody, violent story that takes some acid trip detours before ending at an active volcano. The cast here is all excellent, giving the story the proper weight it needs for the themes of revenge and familial trauma. Plus, it makes great use of the Scandinavian landscape for every scene. At this point, I'm curious if Eggers is going to drop an L as a director, because his last 3 have all been straight W's. Number 12. This next one is a twofer, mainly because the two are part of a trilogy and the stories are connected, but also they're both really good horror throwbacks, but in entirely different styles. First, we got X, which is a 70s throwback in the same vein as the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We follow a film crew looking to make the next big porn movie on the same level as Debbie Does Dallas. They filmed the movie at a rundown old Texas farm owned by a creepy old couple that mainly stays in the house, but as the movie progresses, we find the old couple are much more dangerous than we initially thought. I was never all that familiar with Ty West before this, but he goes all in on the 70s aesthetic, not just in the look, but in performance and storytelling. It really captures the feeling of a grungy exploitation movie from that era. On top of that, the cast here is excellent, featuring the likes of Mia Goth, more on her in a bit, Brittany Snow, budding horror icon Jenna Ortega, and an unrecognizable Kid Cudi, going by his non-stage name Scott Mescudi. Or I guess Mescudi? That would make sense. They're all fantastic and feel like fleshed out characters, so you care when they die. What a concept! Oh, but Ty West and Mia Goth weren't done with just that movie. And considering they made this next one immediately after wrapping on X, the turnaround time is incredible. Set in the same universe, Pearl takes place in 1918 and tells the story of the old woman from X, who was also played by Mia Goth, as a young girl during the influenza epidemic of the time. You know, the one we mislabeled as Spanish flu because Spain was the only country willing to talk about it. While stuck at home waiting for her husband to return from the war, she has to help her German immigrant mother care for her invalid father, at the same time hoping to make it big as a chorus girl in the silent pictures. Shot in the style of an old Technicolor movie, Pearl differs itself from X by going for a more Hitchcockian vibe, from the cinematography even down to the score. Granted, West is willing to be a bit more gruesome than Hitchcock, so we get some absolutely nasty kills, as Pearl's narcissism and desire for fame drives her mad. While Goth's performance fittingly takes center stage, she is at her best, with Tandy Wright playing her mother, who is very stern and strict with Pearl as her flights of fancy would risk them losing the farm and the ability to care for her father. Their egos finally clash over dinner as Pearl's own selfish desires finally start revealing the worst of her. While I love X, I kind of like Pearl a bit more just because we get so very few Technicolor throwbacks as much as we do 70s and 80s throwbacks, but the two together make for a fascinating and eclectic double feature. And speaking of 80s throwbacks, that seems to be the style that they're aiming for with the third movie in this trilogy, Maxine. And with how good these two movies were, I can't wait to see how that one goes. Number 11. I feel like Jordan Peele is a victim of his own success. He came out of the gate swinging with Get Out, and his follow-ups have been good, but not quite as good as his first movie. That said, everything he's made so far has been good, so I'm sure as hell not complaining. Nope was definitely an interesting take on the monster movie genre. With a first half that feels right the hell out of Close Encounters, it's the second half, once the monster is revealed, that will make or break your enjoyment of the movie. I thought the monster design was interesting, and I thought OJ's technique of capturing it was a good tie-in to his background and skills. Plus, I got a kick out of Michael Wincott's character. It felt almost like it could have been a Werner Herzog cameo. So yeah, Get Out is still the high watermark for Peele, but he keeps coming out with great movies that share his unique style. So I have yet to be disappointed. Number 10. Yeah, in the same year that Everything Everywhere All at Once came out, it's easy to dismiss this big budget blockbuster take on multiversal storytelling as worst by comparison. But I still say they make for a great double feature, and this was still a damn good movie. I think it helps that Marvel is keeping Doctor Strange as essentially a horror series, and here they allowed Raimi to really play up to his strengths as a horror director. It's one of the more macabre and unsettling entries in the MCU, and I'm here for it. Plus, I dug the different multiverses that we were shown. It is, of course, not without its flaws. By taking some inspiration from the likes of House of M, this is essentially character assassination for Wanda, especially after all of the growth she went through in WandaVision. And while it's made clear that by using the Darkhold, Wanda has been corrupted and turned evil, if they intend to bring her back, and there's no body at the end of the movie, and I haven't heard of Elizabeth Olsen being done with her contract, so I'm assuming she will, her murders can't just be brushed away with, it was all mind control, so she's completely innocent. They still need to address it and show Wanda has learned from her experience and grown as a character. We'll see if that's the case down the line. Also, America Chavez isn't exactly introduced well here. She essentially serves as a MacGuffin for a lot of the movie, and we never really spend enough time with her to make her finally gaining control of her powers a meaningful moment. Not that she was bad, and the actress playing her did a great job, but I feel like they can do better with her character now that the clunky introduction is out of the way. Of course, this won't be the highest ranking from the MCU this year, but we'll get to that in due time. Number 9. Yeah, much as I loved the other animated output from the big studios this year, the best animated movie for me came from Guillermo del Toro. After spending over a decade trying to get this project off the ground, Del Toro finally got the green light from frickin' Netflix, of all places. And as that was rolling, Disney and some Russian studio fast-tracked their own Pinocchio movies out to try and beat Del Toro, but just like the tortoise and the hare, slow and steady won this race, as Del Toro's Pinocchio will be the one people remember for years to come. At least, for being good. What helps is that it's absolutely gorgeous stop-motion animation, which is fitting. Pinocchio is a puppet, so why not use the animation medium that most relies on puppets to tell the story? Del Toro teamed up with one of the best in the business, too. Mark Gustafson, he's the guy behind Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs. The nicest part is, every animator is credited alongside the voice actor for each character they worked on. It's honestly one of the best displays of respect for animators I've seen done in a movie's credit sequence. The story features Del Toro's twist to it as well, tackling fascism in a similar way to what he did in The Devil's Backbone and Pan's Labyrinth, and featuring much more whimsical, yet macabre imagery. But Pinocchio isn't cute as much as he's a crooked and misshapen thing, which comes from being born out of Geppetto's drunken rage, yet maintains the energy and idealism of a child. And the story is just about him learning about being a real boy, and more about the characters around him learning to accept him for who he is. It also helps that the voice cast here is fantastic. Gregory Mann does a great job as both Pinocchio and Geppetto's original son, who he is trying to replace through Pinocchio. David Bradley is excellent as the much more grizzled and bitter version of Geppetto. And then you've got Ewan McGregor as the cricket, Christoph Waltz as this amalgamation of Stromboli and Honest John, Ron Perlman as this fascist government official hoping to turn Pinocchio into an unkillable soldier. Finn Wolfhard as Perlman's son, who tries to live up to his father's standards until he befriends Pinocchio, and then Tilda Swinton as this split version of the Blue Fairy, where one sister gives Pinocchio life and the other is literally death itself, and then Cate Blanchett making monkey noises. I am not kidding, she plays the monkey Spazzatura, and that monkey only speaks through puppets. So for most of the movie, Blanchett is just making monkey noises.
A what?
And she nails it too. Those recording sessions must have been a blast. I could go on singing this movie's praises, but we got 8 more to cover on this list, so just know that I love Antifa Pinocchio calling Mussolini a piece of shit to his face through song. Bless this movie. Number 8. The loss of Chadwick Boseman was one of the hardest blows to the entertainment industry. Right as he was hitting his stride as an actor and getting some amazing roles and recognition for his talent, he passed away after his private battle with colon cancer. This, of course, led to a major question for Marvel fans, and specifically Marvel Studios. Should T'Challa be recast, or should the character be laid to rest with his actor? To Ryan Coogler and the production team behind Black Panther's sequel, the best choice was to honor Chadwick's passing by laying the character to rest with him, and in doing so, set the tone for the sequel's story. Focusing on T'Challa's sister Shuri, Wakanda Forever sees Shuri ultimately take up the Black Panther mantle as she deals with grieving her brother's sudden passing and a new threat in the form of Talokan, the MCU's version of Atlantis. Taking its name and inspiration from the Aztec city Tlalocan, the Atlanteans from the comics have been adapted as Aztec and Mayan-inspired indigenous underwater people, led by the winged-footed villain/antihero, depending on the story, Namor, or in this movie, Namor, with the new given name Cha-To Al-Mahan. With the US and EU slowly trying to access their own sources of vibranium, Talokan is at risk of being discovered and is willing to go to war with Wakanda to protect themselves from being discovered by the rest of the surface. In a lot of ways, Wakanda Forever improves on the original, namely by having a much more meaningful and thematic climax between the Wakandans and the Talokanil. The production design and costuming is fantastic between both the Wakandans and the Talokanil. Not only do they continue the Afrofuturist, taking inspiration from various tribes of Africa designs in Wakanda, but they incorporated so much Aztec and especially Mayan designs into the Talokanil and into Talocan in this underwater Mayan city, essentially. And then we've got Shuri's struggle with grief and the desire to give into her anger, it being such a dark and rough journey for her, including meeting an unexpected family member when she visits the ancestral plane. The characters have so much more weight to them and nuance, from Shuri and Ramonda to M'Baku, and the newly introduced Namor, whose antagonism comes from his own anger and desire to protect his people. They're all just fantastic performances. As for Namor and the Talokanil, the use of Mesoamerican imagery and cast was widely praised, especially in comparison to James Cameron's more traditional Westerners' interpretation of indigenous people in Avatar. But by making the antagonists like they are in the comics, it inadvertently has an arrow of the savage native stereotype that a lot of Western media was plagued with for centuries. I can't speak to how well the film utilizes the indigenous imagery and characters. That's something that you would have to talk to actual Mesoamerican descended people. But I only have praise for Tenoch Huerta as Namor. His performance is perfect for the character, and I hope he gets even more work out of this movie because the dude deserves it. Number 7. In a lot of years, the MCU entry would usually end up near number 1, but this year was so good, the 2 MCU entries were closer to number 10. Now then, let's talk about the menu. This is arguably, objectively speaking, the most well-made movie of the year. Like Ralph Fiennes' character, the filmmakers here work to ensure every aspect of this meal is cooked to perfection. The cast is fantastic. There's a constant air of menace throughout the evening as the chef reveals his true intentions. The dishes themselves look great, and the themes of the wealthy's opulence at the expense of artistry play throughout the film. I don't want to spoil too much of the movie, so I'll just say this gives new meaning to the term eat the rich. And I'm all here for it. Number 6. Okay, this one is a gimme for this list. Weird Al is not only my favorite musician, the one whom I've seen live the most number of times, and the one celebrity who's had the greatest influence on my life. To this day, he has yet to show himself to be nothing less than a caring and compassionate person to everybody he meets, willing to acknowledge his past mistakes and improve going forward. Also, he makes really funny movies. UHF is actually my favorite live-action movie. Has been ever since I first saw it on VH1 back in the day, and it continues to be even as I can start seeing some of the aspects that haven't quite aged as well, because the movie at its core is timeless. And yet, due to its failure at the box office and troubled production, Al has only ever returned to movies and TV in small capacities, focusing more on his music. Until now, with the official 100% true life story of Alfred Yankovic, starring Daniel Radcliffe. Weird captures Al's manic humor style in a visual form as he lampoons the musical biopic itself, weaving in true aspects of his life with outlandish versions of the tropes you see in musical biopics all the time, leaning into an over-the-top relationship with Madonna, played wonderfully by Evan Rachel Wood, and culminating in one of the wildest and 100% true and accurate climaxes of all time. It sucks that this was just stuck on Roku and wasn't allowed to be in theaters for a little bit, because I feel like between the much more massive fan base he's cultivated in the last 20 years since UHF came out, and the movie's overall quality, this could have had a much better run than UHF did. Plus, more people need to be able to see this movie, goddammit. Number 5. I was kind of surprised to see this ranked as one of the worst movies of the year when I was looking up some of them, because I honestly thought it was really good. Based on the short story The Djinn in the Nightingale's Eye by A.S. Byatt, this movie has Tilda Swinton as Alethea, an English scholar who inadvertently finds a djinn, played by Idris Elba, while visiting Istanbul. Of course, being a scholar of stories and the history of fables and folklore, she knows how djinn wishes work, so hesitates to ask for anything outright. To help her make her wishes, the djinn regales her with the story of his own life, as he served and was the lover of the likes of the Queen of Sheba, a concubine for Suleiman the Magnificent, and the wife of a Turkish merchant in mid-19th century Istanbul who is brilliant but restricted by the culture of the time. Through his story, Alethea falls in love with him and finally begins to use her wishes. I think the main thing that hooked me in was the love story between Alethea and the djinn, as she begins to see him as something more than the trickster stereotype djinn are often depicted to be, and this tragic outcome of their love when she ultimately returns to London with him. Elba and Swinton work great off of each other, and you really feel the connection between these characters. I also loved the various points in Istanbul history that got showcased, from the biblical era to the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent to the Tanzimat era of the Ottoman Empire. It's settings we don't usually see come from Hollywood, and as far as I can tell, wasn't othering Turkish history and culture, but honestly showcasing it. Granted, I'm also not Turkish. It's just I haven't heard one way or the other from actual Turkish people who have seen the film, whether it's good or bad representation. In his 70s, pushing his 80s, George Miller continues to make movies better than those of directors a fraction of his age, which makes me excited for the Furiosa spin-off movie he's got coming out next year. Number 4. I wasn't quite sure about a Benoit Blanc film series in the vein of something like Hercule Poirot, but this movie sold me on it. Rian Johnson and Daniel Craig could make nothing but Benoit Blanc movies until one of them dies, and I'd be okay with that. Like with the first movie, Glass Onion deals with the evils of the super wealthy. In this case, a would-be Elon Musk type with his close-knit circle of friends that are tied to him financially. In fact, as this movie was premiering, Elon had finally started running Twitter, and the correlations of a rich idiot with delusions of genius became all the more apparent. It was pure serendipity. The cast is on par with the first in terms of quality, but gives us a different flavor. Knives Out was much more refined, whereas Glass Onion is a lot more casual, but both are equally good, I would say. Edward Norton captures the buffoonish billionaire perfectly. Kate Hudson and Leslie Odom Jr. get to be together in a movie that isn't some musician's bigoted ego trip. Dave Bautista is fun as this men's rights chud who acts tough while living with his mom. Not that living with your parents is inherently bad, as he said while living with his parents, but that definitely undercuts the whole Sigma male aesthetic the character is going for. You also got Kathryn Hahn as this governor who's continually on edge about the events getting out and affecting her career, and Janelle Monáe is just amazing. Like, she was already a musical prodigy, but here she's playing double duty and shows herself to be just as great of an actress. Is there anything this woman can't do? We've already got a third Benoit Blanc movie confirmed, so the questions now are, which classic rock song will serve as the title, and how will Rian Johnson knock the rich down a peg this next time? Number 3. The eternal debate every Christmas is, does Die Hard count as a Christmas movie? The answer is yes, it does. The movie opens with Christmas in Hollis by Run DMC. McClane goes to LA for his estranged wife's Christmas party, and just because Santa doesn't show up and there's no snow doesn't negate this from being a Christmas movie. Sorry, I digress. Anyway, if you wanted a more definitive Die Hard as a Christmas movie, here's Santa taking out some terrorists to save a little girl. We got all the Christmas aesthetics: Santa, snow, decorations, a tree, family dysfunction, and peace on earth and goodwill toward men. You know, once the bad guys are all dead. This is pure exploitation goodness. Junk food cinema at its finest, and I loved it. David Harbour is great as this Santa who's beat down by the greediness and commercialization of Christmas until this kid in need reminds him of why he does what he does. John Leguizamo is fun as this cartoonish villain literally going by the nickname Scrooge, who hates Christmas so much that even when he realizes he's dealing with the legit, actual to Christ Santa Claus, he still wants to kill him. The family is good in their roles as the tensions of the hostage situation finally make them come together. And the little girl is a blast, too. Even going so far as to emulate Home Alone's traps, but with much more realistic results. If I'm in the Christmas spirit to watch Santa kick some ass, I've got just the stocking stuffer. Forget Cole. Give naughty kids a beatdown for Christmas. Hell, get Krampus in on this action. Number 2. This was one of the hardest to place on my list, namely because I didn't want to end up overpraising a movie about one of the most violent and heartbreaking moments in American history, but I didn't want to deny my own feelings about the movie either. Objectively speaking, Till is a fairly standard biopic. It doesn't really stray too far from the formula, and the performances, writing, and direction are all good. But this isn't about objectivity. Like Mamie Till's decision to show her son in an open casket funeral, this is about shining a light on the evils of America. This movie does not shy away from showing you just how brutalized Emmett Till's body was. And once the movie hit that point, the emotional floodgates opened for me. It's one thing to see old black and white photos of Emmett Till. It's another to see a crisp color video on a 90-foot screen showing you what his body looked like. You could argue that that's emotionally manipulative, that the movie is pulling on your heartstrings to gain an emotional reaction that it maybe didn't earn. I never thought of it that way, though. Despite my concerns about using painful black history as critic fodder and awards bait, I also know just how impactful movies are, how seeing events from history recreated on film can keep them alive in ways no other media can match. And I feel that Emmett and Mamie Till's story is one that needs to be shared. People should see this story in a way where they can really see and experience just how awful it was in the hopes that they are willing to fight against it, just like the original story was fuel for the civil rights movement. I still feel conflicted about where to put this on the list, and if number 2 was too high, but ultimately in terms of movies that elicited an emotional reaction out of me, I'd be lying if I placed it any lower. I think the saddest part is that it took almost 70 years for the law to ban lynching bearing Emmett Till's name to finally be enacted. His mother died before it finally passed. If that isn't the most damning sign of how people should be outraged by this country's ambivalence to this story and why we need to keep telling it, I don't know what is. Before we get to my number 1, here are some quick honorable mentions.
Marketing department. I took Jean's burger suit, let out the crotch a little bit, and bam.
A burger with a bikini on it?
Yeah. I get it. No questions from this guy.
Much as I liked this movie, I couldn't put it as an official list entry. I mean, it's ultimately a 90-minute episode of the show, and while I enjoyed that 90-minute episode, it never felt like an actual movie to me. Still, the characters are great, and I loved the songs.
Let's see who you are. I take off your disguise. And flick.
Oh.
You flipped too hard, damn it!
Shall we help him? And eventually, grape.
While Ragnarok got mostly positive reviews, people seemed to be tired of funny Thor by this entry. Maybe it was that Taika's humor had grown stale, or there was too much humor crammed into this movie, or that the humor clashed with the much more serious story they were telling, some combination of all of those. But for me, I enjoyed the movie overall. I liked Natalie Portman's return and her portrayal of the mighty Thor. I thought Christian Bale was a good villain in the movie, and I thought Thor had a good arc in this. I didn't like it as much as Ragnarok ultimately, but I wouldn't call it bad like a lot of people have been doing, especially not compared to how bad Thor movies could be.
It's gotta be over, dude. I think we're all the way finished. We're through. Stick a fork in it!
I never watched the Jackass TV series, but I always enjoyed the movies. I feel like the movies allowed for some of their best stunts, and this served as a great finale to the old crew. I'm not sure if we'll get a Jackass The Next Generation or anything like that, but getting the old Jackass crew together for one last hurrah made for a great time.
Stand still and die!
For a guy named Knuckles, you are really bad at punching.
Okay, seriously, the fact that we not only have a Sonic the Hedgehog live-action movie series in the 2020s, but they're actually really good, is insane to me. This shouldn't have worked, and that original trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog showed how bad it was going to be. And then the first movie turned out okay after the character redesigns and some reconfiguring by Paramount, and then this sequel was even better. The introduction of Tails and Knuckles works great, and Idris makes a really great Knuckles. Who saw that coming? It's too soon to say if this will be Jim Carrey's final role since he's in semi-retirement, but if it ends up being his final performance, I think he went out on a high note.
What was your favorite part?
Spielberg's recent output has kind of been hit and miss. After Munich, he's only had a few really great movies, and a lot of middling or just okay ones. Not bad, but a lot more forgettable or skippable. In 2022, however, he took inspiration from his own childhood to tell a story about a family's struggles as the father moved them across the country as he gets these better jobs, and the mother has her own underlying mental health issues. It's a nice tribute to his own family and to his love of cinema and filmmaking, and it's one of his best movies in a long time. Number 1. I missed this movie on its initial release in March, and after months of trying to be a regular streamer, I was starting to burn myself out. I was able to make it to my first anniversary as a VTuber, but I still couldn't keep up with the streamer grind. Ultimately, I had to stop streaming, or I was just going to be done making content altogether from the burnout. So, come August, finally feeling the burnout from streaming, I returned to my first love, the movies. And at a time when I needed a really good movie amidst my burnout, I found this movie was making the rounds again, and it stayed at the top of my list for the rest of the year once I saw it. I was already a fan of the Daniels from their debut film Swiss Army Man, and their follow-up goes even further, telling a story of a woman who worries about if she made the right choices in her life, and then getting access to the innumerable timelines of her life based on all of her decisions, from whether or not she married her husband, to moving to America, to how she ran her family's laundromat, all while also having to face that all her concerns about her own life and its meaning could end up driving a wedge between her and her daughter. Of course, this wild story wouldn't be nearly as good without its cast. Michelle Yeoh gives some of the best performances of her career. Ke Huy Quan, who is originally best known as Short Round in Temple of Doom and Data in The Goonies, gets brought back to the spotlight in a dynamite performance as he manages to keep up with Michelle Yeoh, as does Stephanie Hsu playing the various iterations of their daughter. With icons like James Hong and Jamie Lee Curtis rounding out the cast, this cast is so perfect. While the Daniels already showed a unique style in their films, the two of them show here how good they are at creative action, unlike anything I've ever seen. As Michelle Yeoh's character plays around with the very physics of reality itself, the fight scenes are not only well choreographed, but really well thought out. The last time I saw a movie this innovative in its action and fight choreography was probably the first John Wick movie. And while Wick is much more brutal, there really isn't a movie with fights like this. One of my first TikToks after returning to reviewing movies was about how Everything Everywhere All at Once and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness shouldn't be pitted against each other, but enjoyed together as really creative stories that used multiversal travel as part of the plot. And I still feel that's the case. Why pit artworks against each other when you can have them all? Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my bottom 10 movies of 2022 coming out soon. See you then. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for my bottom 10 movies of 2022 coming out soon. Did you have to ruin that take? That was actually a really good take. You're a brat, do you know that? Yes, you are.